The latest world energy forecast is now out, what the EIA predicts for oil consumption if policies don't change. Also, the Senate gets ready to discuss postponing EPA greenhouse gas regulations, the date that Harry Reid has set for a vote on the bipartisan measure. And a 2,000-mile ride comes to the nation's capital. Why the energy source, but not the automobile, is the focus on this trip.
From the Energy News Center in Washington, D.C., this is the Energy Report with Susan McGinnis.
And good afternoon, I'm Tyler Suiters in for Susan McGinnis. Thanks for joining us for this Tuesday edition of the Energy Report. We now have word President Obama himself will head to the Gulf on Friday. This will be his first look in person at the efforts to stop the ongoing oil leak there. And the word comes amid more evidence today that heavier oil is now starting to gush from this broken Deepwater Horizon well. What you see here is video from Tuesday afternoon taken from BP's cameras on the floor of the Gulf. Now, that underwater plume you see there is getting significantly darker, moving from medium gray to black. BP says that's a natural fluctuation, something that is probably not permanent. But an engineering professor at Cal Berkeley says that color change may indicate that the leak has hit a reservoir of more oil and less natural gas. That is bad news because the natural gas would simply evaporate. Meanwhile, the EPA push for BP to use a less toxic oil dispersant has now hit a snag. White House Energy Advisor Carol Browner says that the alternatives are not as widely available as needed. Well, should the companies involved in oil spills, like BP is right now, be held financially responsible for all the damage caused by the accidents? Congress is now considering companion bills to raise the cap on damage claims from oil spills. And today, the Senate Energy Committee discussed that matter. Among the witnesses on hand today, Associate Attorney General Thomas Pirelli. He told lawmakers the cap should indeed be increased from the current $75 million, but he wouldn't say just how high that cap should go.
In a situation where you have the risk of a similar major oil spill, you have activity that is risky itself but highly lucrative, and you have the companies that are engaged in it in the best position to invest in new technology to ensure it's safer, to ensure that they have sufficient staff, to ensure that they are complying with all of the federal regulations. That is a situation where not having any cap, we think makes a lot of sense and is consistent with the basic principle that a polluter should pay for all of the damage that they cause.
Pirelli took questions from senators, including this woman, Ranking Member Lisa Murkowski. Just last month, she blocked a Senate plan to raise the cap to $10 billion. But Murkowski today conceded that perhaps that cap does need to be unlimited. Also at today's hearing, David Hayes, the number 2 at the Interior Department, he told the committee to consider increasing civil and criminal penalties for offshore disasters. Right now, the criminal penalty is $100,000. The civil penalty is $35,000 per day. Senate leaders have now agreed on a date to find out if they agree on EPA greenhouse gas regulation. June 10th is the date we're expecting a vote on what is known as a disapproval resolution. Lisa Murkowski filed that resolution earlier this year. It's a measure that would postpone EPA's ability to regulate GHGs. Now, Murkowski's office says she and Majority Leader Harry Reid have agreed to extend the privileged status of her disapproval resolution until the 10th of June. That's when the full Senate would vote on that measure. The disapproval resolution has 41 co-sponsors. It needs 51 votes, a simple majority, in order to pass through the Senate. Even as he oversees portions of the Gulf disaster, today Interior Secretary Ken Salazar is once again dealing with questions about the Minerals Management Service. A new report from the Inspector General says that between 2000 to 2008, MMS staffers accepted various gifts from oil and gas companies and used government computers to view pornography. Salazar says several employees in the report have since resigned, were fired, or referred for prosecution. The Secretary added that the report underscores the importance of his plan to abolish MMS and replace it with 3 new entities. The latest EIA International Energy Outlook is now out, and the administration is highlighting the role of developing nations in the decades to come. The report says that world marketed energy consumption will grow by almost 50% between 2007 and 2035, and that growth will be fueled in large part by China and India. According to the EIA in 2007, those two countries, China and India, combined for roughly 20% of world energy consumption, and by 2035 that total will reach 30%. For perspective, over the same period, the U.S. share of world energy consumption will drop from 21% to 16%. The EIA calls renewables, quote, the fastest growing source of world energy supply, but it adds that under current policies, fossil fuels will meet more than 75% of total energy needs in 2035. The report also says oil prices will reach $133 per barrel by 2035, and that total liquid fuels consumption will jump by 28% by that year. Speaking of India, it is now the world's 5th largest carbon emitter. For the first time since 1994, that country is disclosing its emissions, which since then have risen by 58%. The government study was based on data from 2007, and India says it shows a sharp increase in industrial activity. Since then, emissions from electricity, cement, and waste have more than doubled. That's in addition to substantial rises in the transportation and residential sectors. According to India's latest inventory, the country relied on coal for 90% of its electricity, and that accounts for more than a third of the country's emissions. Its carbon intensity fell by 30%. As for the world's top 2 carbon emitters, China and the U.S., they are now seeing eye to eye on natural gas development in China. Secretary of State Hillary Clinton is in Beijing right now for high-level bilateral talks on a variety of issues, among them the promotion of China's domestic technology. On the issue of nat gas, the U.S. and China will agree to work together on development of China's resources. In Secretary Clinton's words, quote, we believe that could well lead to new economic opportunities in both countries and a lower carbon output level. As part of the agreement, the U.S. Geological Survey will assist China developing natural gas production from its shale resources. The only U.S. company now enriching uranium for nuclear power has a major boost right now as it aims for a federal loan guarantee for a new manufacturing plant. USEC will get $200 million in new investment, $100 million apiece from Babcock & Wilcox and from Japan's Toshiba. USEC was spun off from DOE back in the 1990s, and it runs an aging plant that's using older technology. It applied to DOE for $2 billion in loan guarantees to finance a new centrifuge enrichment plant. But last year, DOE sent that application back, saying that neither USEC's technology nor its finances were ready to proceed. The new investment is conditioned on those guarantees coming through. In return, B&W will make the centrifuges. Toshiba will be able to sell nuclear fuel bundled with new nuclear plants. Toshiba owns nuclear reactor vendor Westinghouse. Elsewhere right now, many graduates are hitting the books for their master's theses as they're leaving college, but Castlen Kennedy is instead hitting the open road. And this is why. The University of Texas student is on a 10-day, 2,300-mile trip from Austin to Boston. A pretty good ring to it, right? The trick here is that her vehicle runs on natural gas. She calls it a real-life lab experiment. She's looking at the benefits and the challenges of traveling on an alternative fuel.
Natural gas is kind of a very hot topic right now. There's so many benefits to utilizing natural gas, including domestic abundance of the resource, so utilizing an American fuel as opposed to importing fuels, the clean burning benefits of natural gas, and of course the cost. It's about 30% cheaper than gasoline.
As for what comes next, Castlen plans to take the data from her trip and then benchmark CNG against other fuels, then develop some policy recommendations on using natural gas as a transportation fuel. As for why she chose this field and this fuel, well, in addition to being a full-time student, Castlen works part-time for natural gas producer Apache. As we wind up this Tuesday here in the nation's capital, we'll take a look at a full slate of activities for tomorrow. First of all, 8:30 a.m. Eastern, the Blue Ribbon Commission on America's Nuclear Future is opening the second day of its open meeting. This is taking place at the Washington Marriott. Clean Skies News will be on hand. At 10 a.m. Eastern on Capitol Hill, the House Natural Resources Committee is holding the first of 2 oversight hearings on the OCS oil and gas strategy and also the implications of the Deepwater Horizon rig explosion. That hearing is taking place in the Longworth House Office Building. And at 1:20 p.m., President Obama is in California visiting the Solyndra Solar Facility in Fremont. He'll tour the high-tech facilities and then make remarks to workers on jobs and the economy and the tie-in with energy. That's all coming up tomorrow. In the meantime, that is this Tuesday edition of the Energy Report. You can reach our team here in the nation's capital anytime, and the address is right here on your screen. It's contact@cleanskies.com. You can also follow us throughout your day on Twitter and Facebook. For all of us here in the Energy News Center, we're glad you're with us. I'm Tyler Suiters, and you're watching Clean Skies News.